All right, we're back. This is the Game of Thrones Companion Podcast presented by The Disorderly, Season 8, Episode 5, entitled The Bells. And let me start by saying this. Chill with the hate, guys. Game of Thrones was never without its flaws. There were amazing moments. There were particularly weak moments. Yes, even when the stories were based on the George R. R. Martin novels. I think what you have here is a combination of extreme scrutiny based on how popular the show is and how the internet works these days, with massive Reddit threads and fan theories, plus a presumed lack of writing talent by the Double Ds simply because they're not George R. R. Martin. I understand that some of it's warranted, right? It seems pretty obvious that their writing ability sort of lacks the complexity and nuance of George's original story, which also could just come from the fact that they're not the writers of the original story. Like, you try picking up somebody else's novel halfway through and finishing it with the same complexity as the original writer, it's obviously very hard, if not impossible. But I think what you have here is people almost going into these episodes expecting them to suck. And all the negativity is really annoying me. Never was this more evident, by the way, than the fake news story that the showrunners forgot to edit out Jaime Lannister's real hand in the final moment with Cersei. People almost took joy in the idea that the Double Ds messed up again, like they did last week with the Starbucks coffee cup that was left on set during one of the scenes. But in reality, his golden hand was in every single shot of that scene, and the photo that was spreading around was for a promotional sort of photo shoot or whatever taken before the CGI. But that didn't stop people from being haters because that's the way everyone seems to be taking this season, and I'm sick of it. So I'm going to try to break this episode down, hopefully explain a lot of the perceived negatives away and make sense of them and not pass over the flaws, but also avoid harping on them because that's just annoying. So here we go. It's going to be harder than you think, by the way, just because I feel like people are so dug in with hating this season. I don't know. I just don't. I actually hated the first episode probably most. So that's just me. I'm obviously in a league of my own when it comes to a lot of these podcasts, but hey, what are you going to do? Might even be a good thing. Anyway, we last left Dany on the verge of breaking mad, for lack of a better term. She just saw Missandei get her head chopped off, which leaves the body count pretty high for people who meant something to Dany, right? She lost Khal Drogo early on. She's basically lost Jon Snow, or at least the heart of Jon Snow. She's down 2 dragons, her most trusted advisor and protector in Ser Jorah, her right-hand woman, Missandei, and also Ser Varys and Tyrion, who were once her huge assets, and now you've got the former plotting her overthrow and the latter making mistakes at every corner. Also Daario, who seems to have just disappeared from the script, but was once a huge part of her small council as well. So you've got Dany and who? Grey Worm, a man who is just as angry as anyone else about Missandei's death, as evident by him throwing her one possession into the fire. Also someone who's only known war and violence his whole life. So this notion that Dany snapping and burning the city was rushed, how? How does it not make sense for her to have all this add up to Dany losing her shit? You know what I mean? Also, not for nothing, but throughout the series, Dany has been wildly aggressive. She's had wildly aggressive impulses. She's a mother of dragons. She's a breaker of chains. She's, quote unquote, destined to take the throne, and she'll do it at all costs. Her council basically spent 8 seasons trying to calm her down and temper those aggressive instincts. Sometimes she listened, sometimes she didn't, but with her loved ones sort of falling one by one and no trusted counsels to calm her down, of course that violent streak is going to take over. It's been building towards that for the entire series. I don't think it's rushed. I don't understand why people are saying it's rushed. I think if you think that this is rushed or breaks her story arc or her character archetypes or whatever, then I don't think you're paying attention. I don't know. I don't even know what to say. It seems like this is where they were leading with the story the entire time. And by the way, people dumping on the Double Ds, I'd be shocked if this wasn't a George R. R. Martin decision. Like, I think George gave the Double Ds not the full details or the plot points on how to get there, but I think he gave them the general end story and how he wanted things to end up. And I think one of those things is Dany ultimately becoming the Mad Queen. We'll get to it later, but there's some debate over whether or not it's justified. But regardless, I think that's where George wanted this to end up. So I don't think this was a Double D screw up, basically, or they undermined all of George's character building. No, not at all. I think this made perfect sense. I don't even understand what we're talking about when we're talking about it being rushed or basically just being something that didn't fit her character. It makes no sense to me. In that moment where the bells are ringing and Dany has the option to either accept their surrender or go on a murderous rampage, she decides to go on a murderous rampage because she's always been in love with that part of it. at least in my opinion. She hides behind the altruistic sort of mask of being the freer of slaves, but she's also been pretty brutal about how she conducts business. Loads of executions, nailing hundreds of people to crosses, killing people who were begging for mercy. I'm not sure she ever really wanted to rule a peaceful kingdom. I think what she really wanted was to conquer. And every event leading up to this moment of the bells ringing tipped the scales towards a mad queen versus a merciful one. I thought that was actually pretty amazing, pretty well done. It sort of made sense how easy it was. For those criticizing the fact that the battle was so one-sided, should we really be surprised? We were led to believe that this is going to be an even battle. According to the advisors, you had even amount of troops. You had Cersei, who had the Iron Fleet, and all these other sort of allies, the Golden Company. She was well positioned, and Dany's troops were depleted from the Battle of Winterfell. But I think people forget how powerful dragons are. Obviously not now that you've seen it in action, but one was killed by a Night King. First of all, an undead freaking zombie created by the children of the forest, basically a mythical figure, throwing a borderline magical spear out of nowhere, killing the first one. Not even sure we knew that was possible, so I'll give Dany a pass on that. And the other dragon died from getting shot with a scorpion mounted to a boat. This is a technology that never existed before, and certainly something that Dany had never seen, save for the one battle where Bronn shot at a dragon, but this is different. There's a whole fleet of them. Also, I know people were dumping on the logistics of Euron sneaking up on Dany with a handful of ships, while in reality, Dany should be able to see them coming from her position in the sky. But can we not just chalk that up to Euron being, super sneaky and super good at sailing? Like, who cares if every detail is spelled out, explaining how he was able to sneak up on her? How is Arya able to walk around without being heard? She's good at being a ninja, and you're as good at sailing. Let's just suspend disbelief for 1 second as we watch friggin' dragons soar through the sky. I feel like that's not asking too much, right? Like, we can use our imaginations a little bit, right? Anyway, both of the dragon kills were abrupt surprises. So it would follow then that once Dany has the ability to plan a real attack, that she would win with ease. The only threat to the dragon were those scorpions. So as long as she can, dodge a few giant arrows and maneuver around a bit as they struggle to slowly turn around, she should have no problem taking them out. And once those are gone, she's completely unchecked. Just stay off the ground and light everything on fire. What could possibly stop her at that point? So the one-sidedness of the battle checked out, made perfect sense to me. I actually enjoyed those little dive bomb tactics as well. Hide above the clouds and crash in on the boats. That explains their added difficulty in shooting her down. But yeah, it was basically, that was the gist of it. Dany won with such ease that by the time the Lannisters surrendered, she wasn't satisfied yet. She wasn't done exacting her revenge, and we saw the result of that sort of unquenched wrath. But Dany turning into the Mad Queen obviously wasn't the only thing that happened in this episode, so let's get to the rest. Varys was busy scribing messages about Jon being the true heir to the throne. He presumably, by the way, got a bunch of them off because, we saw him writing multiple, and it started in the daylight, then it was nighttime, so you see the passage of time right there. He burned the last one, but let's assume a bunch of important people now know that Jon's claim to the throne is legit. That would be a pretty cool conclusion for Varys' story arc, right? He died doing one last heroic deed for the realm, and that could and probably will play a key role in the final power struggle between Jon and Dany, in the series finale. In terms of Tyrion, he sort of did what he had to do by ratting out Varys, I guess. But then again, it was kind of a moot point because Dany already knew about the betrayal. Nevertheless, this starts Jon out on the journey of seeing who Dany really is. He sees her execute one of her top advisors in Varys, who deserves it, I guess, from her perspective, but it was done in such a cold, sort of disdainful way that played down almost bored version of Dracarys. This is followed by Dany saying that she has no love in this place, only fear. That was the real snap, by the way. Not the moment where the bells are ringing, but the moment when Jon makes it clear that he can't be in a relationship with her. He can't love her in the way that she loves him. She no longer has his heart, and that was kind of the final straw. As Mr. Aemon said way earlier on, I couldn't even tell you what season, but back at Castle Black, a Targaryen alone in this world is a terrible thing. She is now officially alone, or at least sharing in that loneliness and thirst for blood with Grey Worm, her last sort of friend. And by the way, to contrast that, the other Targaryen that's left on this world is Jon Snow, and he's not alone. He's surrounded by Arya, Sansa, Bran, the people and armies and the Northerners that love him, the wildlings that love him. So he is very much not a Targaryen alone in this world, whereas Dany is. So, just to contrast those two things. I'd also like to make a case for Bran real quick. Now, I've been probably on the the team of kind of hating on Bran and thinking that his story is boring, but I might have a theory or a sort of path to a theory that would make me be more on the Bran train or whatever. So basically, when Jon and Dany are talking, it's all pre-battle in the beginning part of the episode. Not Jon and Dany. Dany and Tyrion. Dany said, "Someone has betrayed me. Jon Snow. Varys knows the truth about Jon because Tyrion told him. Tyrion learned from Sansa, who learned from Jon, even though she begged him not to tell her. But we're forgetting about one more link in that chain. Bran started the whole thing in motion. Perhaps he knew that Dany was as much of a threat to end civilization as the Night King. She basically has the only nuclear weapon in Westeros. So he started this whole chain knowing how it would play out in order to set everything up for the ultimate defeat of Daenerys. That would make a lot of sense for me and better explain sort of why we spent so much time following his journey to become the Three-Eyed Raven. I mean, we spent a huge chunk of the show talking about the many-faced god, and that paid off. We spent a ton of the time talking about the Lord of the Light, and that paid off. So it would seem unlikely that Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven wouldn't somehow play into the series finale. But anyway, back to the episode at hand. Tyrion frees Jaime Lannister from the chains, returning the favor for what Jaime did for Tyrion back when he was on trial for murdering Joffrey. They share a touching last moment before Jaime goes off to his ultimate death in an attempt to rescue Cersei. Which brings me to my next gripe about all the complainers. This seems like obviously the theme of this episode. Jaime Lannister's story arc. I keep reading things about how the story set Jaime up to be a bad guy turned good, and then the Double Ds undermined all of this by reverting him back to the bad guy Jaime. But was this really so unbelievable? I think the larger point is that he was lying to himself with Bran. He was lying to himself by staying in the North. He wanted so badly to be good, an honorable man, but a lifetime with Cersei had corrupted him beyond repair, basically. Cersei was the love of his life no matter how twisted their relationship was, and in the end, he wanted to die by her side. He felt that he owed her that, and all things considered, that's kind of a plausible situation, right? People change to a certain extent. They sort of bend in one direction or the other, but ultimately people don't change. At least that's the story they're telling with Jaime, which is a tragic story, obviously, but so what? So what if his story is tragic? So what if he got a glimpse of what it means to be an honorable man and ultimately reverted back to the guy who pushed Bran out of a window? You know, it's possible. It's tragic, but it sort of checks out. Now, I'll fully admit the battle with Euron was dumb. At the end of the day, I don't think I cared about Euron Greyjoy one bit. And while I understand he's sort of a bigger, more imposing character in the books, in the show universe, he was basically just a waste of time. Even the fight with Jaime, he stabbed Jaime a couple times, but that's not ultimately what killed Jaime, so ultimately, who cares? But aside from that, I thought Jaime's story made sense in this episode, just with an unnecessary added sort of duel in the middle. The other big complaint, obviously, was Cersei's death, that it wasn't satisfying enough. Really? She's always been overconfident and delusional to the sort of detriment of all around her. She's clearly very ruthless, but she seems to think she's the smartest person in the room and often finds out she's not. I mean, look no further than the death of all her children. People keep talking about all she cares about is protecting her children. Well, they're all dead. So clearly some of her tactical decisions and strategy have not worked out throughout the seasons. You know, she's underestimated Stannis Baratheon, nearly lost King's Landing back in the Battle of Blackwater. If you remember, she was sitting in the throne room on the verge of killing herself before that battle took a turn in her favor thanks to Tyrion and her father, not thanks to her mastermind strategy. Then she also underestimated the High Sparrow, who ended up locking her away in a prison and marching her through the streets completely naked while the people of King's Landing ridiculed her. How is her underestimation of Dany not perfectly in line with her character? And as far as the satisfaction of her death, was it not poetic enough for people? She starts in her fancy tower in the impenetrable Red Keep with a cocky sort of smirk on her face. She thinks she's going to win this battle with ease and everything's going to go smoothly as the time that she blew up the sigil, right? Same view, right? Same viewing point as that master plan was done, but that was all cloak and dagger. That wasn't a straight head-to-head war. Her father was the mastermind when it came to battle strategy. Cersei was never that person. So as her impending doom begins to close in on her, she starts to slowly break, and you see the layers of arrogance peeling away through the episode to the point where the single tear comes down, and by the time Jaime finally finds her, she's basically a broken, scared mother, no longer a monster, evil queen. You know, she's human again. If that's not satisfying enough for you, the complete unraveling of a person, then I don't know what to tell you. I feel like you might have some issues to deal with. Also, the symbolism of the Red Keep collapsing on Cersei and Jaime, retribution for all their sins, this seemed like a just ending. Not to mention the whole Valonqar prophecy being completed. The prophecy reads that when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands around your pale white throat and choke the life from you. Now, Valonqar means younger sibling. Cersei spends her life thinking it's Tyrion, but in the end it ends up being Jaime, which some people sort of theorize, but it wasn't Jaime killing her. Jaime didn't strangle her as many thought. He had his hands around her neck in an embrace as tears rolled down her face just moments before she was crushed by the Red Keep. Was this moment under the direction of George R.R. Martin? Was it a purely off-script Double D decision? I don't know, but I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. I thought it was a satisfying conclusion to Cersei's story arc. And you also have a just ending for Jaime, who was ultimately killed by Dany, the Kingslayer being killed by the daughter of said king. You know, I don't know. I can't understand the hate. Was the episode perfect? I guess not, but what do you expect? I don't know. I don't get it. And finally, people seemed upset, of course, about Arya going all the way to the Red Keep and just turning around and not killing anybody. But I disagree with this as well, of course, because that's the theme of this episode. It was a great moment, I thought, between Arya and the Hound. The Hound had spent his life seeking revenge, and that desire consumed him. It turned him into a sour monster of a person without an ounce of happiness in his life. His parting words to Arya before he fulfilled his destiny and ultimately died doing so was to tell her not to be like him. Tell her that it's not a life worth living, that it's not too late for her to turn back and change the path she's on. This is a perfect conclusion to their relationship, and it makes Arya a real wild card heading into the finale, especially with the whole riding on a white horse thing, which seemed to have some clear religious symbolism, particularly after following the moment at the Battle of Winterfell where you had the Christ symbology. So in the Bible, in the book of Revelations, there's a verse about Jesus riding a white horse while wearing garments stained in blood. So the verse reads as follows. It's actually 2 or 3 verses, but I saw heaven opened, and look, a white horse, and the one seated on it is called Faithful and True, and he judges and carries on war in righteousness. His eyes are a fiery flame, and on his head are many diadems. He has a name written that no one knows but he himself, and he is clothed with an outer garment stained with blood, and he is called by the name. Now, according to an entry on Quora.com by a Bible teacher named John O'Gara, this is all part of a vision that the Apostle John had about the righteousness and justice of war that Christ will wage against all enemies on behalf of his God and Father. That could spell some important foreshadowing for our girl Arya. You know, there's also a theory going around that Bran warged into the White Horse to make it appear and guide Arya out of the battle. I guess I could see that. I don't know. I could see it also being sort of a straight-up act of fate and prophecy because Arya is the chosen savior of humanity. Either plays, in my opinion, but I think the whole savior thing makes more sense to me. Oh, and shout out to the Clegane Bowl. That was cool, I guess. Beautifully shot and a fitting ending to their long-standing rivalry. It felt like a little bit of fan service, but, you know, I get it. It was entertaining. But let's end with this. I want to point to the moment in the throne room prior to the battle. Jon and Tyrion are telling Dany she should avoid burning the city, and Dany tells them that she essentially has to. You know, they talk about mercy and how Cersei sees mercy as a weakness, but Dany sees it as a strength. Yes, a ton of people will die at King's Landing, but once Dany is on the Iron Throne, she will make sure a tyrant never rules again. So let's just say that there is a long summer in endless peace as the result of what happened at King's Landing. Would that not make it all worth it? Yes, the Lannisters surrendered, but by completely wiping them off the face of the earth, didn't she guarantee there would never be a Lannister uprising again? Isn't that the same sort of dilemma that the United States faced while dropping the nuke on Hiroshima? How many innocents died from that bomb? How many more would have died if the U.S. decided not to use it? Do the ends justify the means? There are a lot of sort of parallels between this attack on King's Landing and what happened in Hiroshima. Just something to think about as we head into the series finale. But that'll do it for this week. Please rate, review, subscribe to this podcast, and head over to thedisorderly.com for the best in sports and entertainment. Only one episode left of Thrones. Can't believe I'm even saying it. It seems surreal. I've been watching the show every single Sunday as they've aired since 2011, and I've seen every episode at least twice, many 3 or more times. So yeah, I'm pretty damn invested in this show. One more episode to bring it home, and you know it's going to be polarizing. The way this is going, I guarantee there's going to be a huge faction of people hating on it, huge faction of people who are disappointed. There's probably going to be people who are sort of standing for it still and love it, but I don't know. We'll see. Here's to keeping an open mind, I guess, and enjoying this last hour and a half of Thrones. I'll see you guys next week. I'll be here regardless. I'll give you my honest, unfiltered opinions, and I hope you have been enjoying this podcast so far. Definitely more to come. I want to do Watchmen, possibly Big Little Lies as well, and then Succession. I got a lot of things coming up, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss anything, and I will see you guys next week for the conclusion. God, it feels weird to say, of Game of Thrones. I'm excited. Peace.